Today we'll be talking about the issues surrounding online anonymity and privacy, and the protective steps being taken by both individuals and lawmakers. First, we should distinguish one from the other. Privacy is the ability to know and control what personal data is accessible by whom. Anonymity is achieved when that data is unable to be traced back to a specific individual.
Companies use personal data in multiple ways. An example is AI. AI can only exist with the magnitude of personal data it is trained on. Also, companies sell data to third parties with sometimes unknown intentions. Big data is heavily and increasingly used for ads and marketing. Data privacy is a concern for several reasons. One is safety. Nowadays, it's easy to find someone's address and info on Google, even if they don't want that info out there. Also, systems use people's data to make decisions about them that can limit their choices and opportunities, and potentially, by doing so, increase social and economic inequality. Thus, data limits personal agency. Companies like Facebook can use data to sway public opinion. Facebook's problems with data privacy are now universally known. Cambridge Analytica is a political consulting and strategic communication firm behind Donald Trump and the pro-Brexit campaigns. Cambridge Analytica paid to access the user data of millions of Facebook users for the purpose of their campaign. This is a prominent example of how user data is being used to sway public opinion significantly. The major company Alibaba in China rolled out Sesame Credit, which scores individuals not only on typical credit score categories, but also categories that judge personal preference. In interviews, people have mentioned that their day-to-day behavior has been impacted by the score. Google recently admitted that it gave access to a magnitude of personal Gmail inboxes to hundreds of companies. Google claims it was transparent with users and encourages reading the permission pop-ups more closely. This was still a hard blow for Google's reputation.
The U.S. launched the terrorist surveillance program as a direct response to 9/11. Under Section 702, the government is authorized to monitor, without a warrant, communications involving any party believed to be outside the U.S., as they are not protected by the Fourth Amendment. Section 702 was reauthorized last year. A system known as PRISM collects information from U.S. companies, which is then stored in databases and data mined under the StellarWind program. The government continues to request greater systematic access from private companies due to perceived threats to national security and growing ability to analyze large datasets. Companies often oblige because access for national security purposes is often excluded from data protection laws. The private sector remains unsure of what they're allowed to disclose to the public, raising concerns about transparency. The government has demonstrated the effectiveness of surveillance in bolstering national security. 54 terrorist attacks have been thwarted, and terrorist organizations have been dismantled as a result of surveillance programs under the Patriot Act in Section 702. Military drones have especially been useful for surveillance and targeted killings.
In reaction to data privacy concerns, the EU Parliament passed a General Data Protection Regulation in April of 2016 as an attempt to unify and strengthen protections across EU nations. As of May 2018, any companies found to be in violation of these regulations can be fined up to 4% of annual global turnover, a significant number in the case of large tech companies. The GDPR bolsters a variety of new and existing security measures. For example, data consent requests must be easily accessible and unambiguous, ruling out the use of long, convoluted terms and conditions. Individuals must be able to request a free copy of their collected personal data, as well as request that all of their information be removed. Importantly, the GDPR applies to all companies that serve citizens within the EU, regardless of the company's location. State governments in the U.S. have begun following the GDPR's precedent. Passed in June 2018, the California Consumer Privacy Act includes many of the same protections found in the GDPR. The 2020s will introduce a multitude of similar laws, as Washington, New Jersey, and Vermont are amongst the states currently drafting data privacy acts of their own. Yet, such policy has the potential for several unintended consequences. This past spring, you likely received dozens of privacy policy updates and, like others experiencing opt-in fatigue, consented to each one without much thought. Smaller companies that don't have the resources to reach compliance are simply leaving the EU, hurting competition. The research efforts driving progress struggle to provide the necessary consent details in advance, slowing innovation. States must keep these issues in mind as data regulations spread.
The onion router and VPNs are fairly popular methods to help remain anonymous, but it can also be as simple as using different passwords in question answers, or living in a country with better privacy laws. Predicting what hackers will target and how is never straightforward. It is much like a game of cat and mouse between the hackers and cryptography systems. Furthermore, people may not be willing to give up the free benefits of personalized and predictive technologies. Overall, government policy and company operations finally seem to be following the public's desire for greater control and protection of their online data. While it is still up to the individual to determine how much data they share, ideally it will become clearer when and how they are doing so.